Hello house lovers, welcome to Bon Accord for yet another epic instalment of what is going on inside the house. So with no further ado, let's go in. We have had news from council about planning, and I thought in my infinite wisdom it might be a good time to have a little sit down and go through the steps that we went through to get to this point of nearly planning approval 101. Okie doke. I did learn some things which I would never have known before and which may be of some use to you if you have the unfortunate joy of going through this process yourself. First, true confession, I found this whole part of the process exceptionally stressful. I don't know why. Maybe it's childhood issues. Let's start at the very beginning. First things first, check the zoning. Depends obviously where you're living as to how the various councils demarcate the land usage, which I guess brings us to the most vital point of be realistic. So understand what the zoning capacities are to start with when you're shopping around. The next thing with that same question is what are the overlays of that area? Now, our house is in an inner city area which has a heritage overlay over the whole suburb. It also has individual heritage overlays on streets, and some have it and some don't. Our street does, but not all the buildings within it do, which makes it slightly complicated. And what actually complicated it even more was that our building wasn't on any sort of heritage register, but then halfway through the planning process, it became listed as significant. But I digress. The next thing to do then is to look at the building you're interested in buying and see if it is on a heritage register, a heritage list that will affect what can and can't be done in the future. So those are the basics. The next step is to determine what the council planning regs are. And that will give you an idea of what you may or may not need to do. And, which is what we did as well, you can just walk right in and ask for an informal chat / conversation / meeting with a planning officer who is usually at the counter and available. Just to get broad stroke ideas. Can you do this? Can you do that? What do you need? What don't you need? Blah, blah, blah. It just gives you a good idea of what you're going to have to do or not do to get your project approved. Okay, next thing you need to do is read the planning schemes of the council that you are hoping to buy into. Now, that can be a little complicated, and at this point, perhaps if you have an architect on board, you can handball that task over to them. At this point as well, if it's not going to be a straightforward lick of paint and a repairing of the front gate, you might want to get a planning consultant who manages this whole process for you. Now, we started with a planning consultant, and to be perfectly honest, that relationship didn't work out very well. They weren't very collaborative and didn't share anything with us before submitting it. And we were very lucky in that our designer was able to manage that process herself, having had experience with heritage buildings in council before. Which brings us to time. So when you look at the website of whatever council that you live in and you click on planning applications, it will say, we usually process these within da 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 da. Well, ignore that. Some of them are more honest than others, but it will take at least 12 months, I feel, in Australia. And it depends where you might be. You might be lucky and be in a jurisdiction that moves things along really quickly. Not so here in the fair city of Melbourne. So 12 to 18 months. It has taken us about that amount of time. We submitted our plans about 11 months ago. The next thing to do is to have a look with an eagle eye at your potential property and determine what some of the crucial issues might be. What we discovered was that our boundary wasn't in fact our boundary, and that part of our building encroached upon the neighbour's title. Now that unto itself took about 12 months of bureaucracy to resolve, and we had to do that before we could have got planning approval, because in fact that bit of land didn't belong to us that we were planning to build on, all of which need to be factored into your stress and anxiety levels and add a few months to your time schedule. Okie dokie, we're moving right along. Now, the next thing, this was also tricky, but hey ho. The people who are going to be affected most by what you're doing are the neighbours. Yes, so it's time to make some friends. I made contact with our neighbours first before we actually had drawn up designs because we had the issue with the shared boundary. Now it's kind of awkward, but I also felt it was really important that the relationship started face to face rather than through a planning officer or a planning lawyer or going through some kind of legal process and it being very anonymous, so I wanted them to know who we were. But also, the more communication you have with the people who are going to be affected by whatever you might be doing, then the easier it can be to have any problems flagged in advance and to be able to try and figure out solutions, because everyone ultimately wants to live happily with each other. Everything is solvable. Right, so now you have drawn up your plans and you are ready to submit. Now, you can also add all manner of amendments to your application, and what we could do, because this was a heritage building, we were able to attach an owner's heritage report, being me. My report then was the history of the house, when it was built, the kind of architectural style it was, how it related to the rest of the area and to the suburb. I also listed some of the materials that the house was built of, and I pointed out some of the things that we were going to do. I showed examples of buildings that were nearby and examples of what we wanted to do, and basically included as much information and visuals to show precedent and also examples as I could. Which brings us to the other interesting point, is that everyone is an expert and everyone has their own opinion about what's the right and the wrong way to go. I can only say you've got to trust your instinct, be truthful, be transparent, and do your research. And obviously follow the planning rules. And there you go. You submit your plans, which usually there is a fee, obviously, and then you wait, and you wait, and you wait, and you wait. And in fact, while you're waiting, you can do what I've been doing, which is getting started on some of the tasks that can be done which don't require planning permission. So generally that's anything inside the house. However, if your house is historically important or in any kind of heritage register, you might find that some of the interiors are covered by heritage and council caveats and overlays and legislation. So you might want to double check that as well before you start ripping out period fixtures. Objections. Objections. Look, it's inevitable and it's part of the process. It's not pleasant because you feel very judged, but it's a good exercise nonetheless. You do have to consider how what you're doing is going to impact on the people around you. The council is going to take all of that on board before they then give you their decision. You work with your designer and with the planning officer who has been appointed to your project from the council, and you go through the objections and you figure out what's realistic, what are just crazy, and what you might need to do. Again, depending on your council, but the planner should give you really clear feedback as to what the precedents are, what you should take into consideration. You then go and do another iteration of your plans, which you then submit as an amended application, which is what we did. Again, all of this is dependent upon your local councils and authorities as to how they play the game. Council has signed off on our amended plans, which means we're done. And until you get approval, you can't finalize your plans, which means you can't really appoint your builder, which means you can't really know what your budget is going to be. But there you are, house lovers. That has been our journey for planning approval. I hope it has been of some use to you. It's just been great to talk about it and get it off my chest. Thanks for watching, house lovers. Thank you for subscribing and thank you for liking. Feel free to ask a question. I know nothing. Until next week, take care. I look forward to next week's epic, whatever it might be about. But until then, house lovers, see you later.